Hey guys, first regardsman here, and I'll be talking about what's that? A Reddit post talking about a showcase I made of the new Chaos Terminator boss in Space Marine 2 patch 14. Now, I posted this a couple days ago. I said players are going to crash out over this boss, and I do think that is definitely true. However, somebody did make a pretty good Reddit post talking about their experiences with bosses and enemies in this game, and this one did blow up a bit. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about the general community reaction to new enemies in this game, and more importantly, what the reaction will be to a very difficult new boss. So first up, I want to go over what this guy says, and we'll talk a bit about what some of you players think in the comment section below. So number one, he says, we finally have a really solid look at the new Terminus Terminator, and the complaints I've seen for this Terminator have been the same complaints I've heard for every other Terminus enemy during their respective initial launch. This Terminus enemy should replace the Lesser Sorcerer boss in Obelisk. I've been asking for this for ages. I think this boss fits perfectly into maps like Obelisk and also the end of the new Purgation update. Both of those operations feel like they have a significantly lacking portion at the end for their finale, and also we are not getting a new operation patch 14, so going back and retroactively adding in this boss I think kind of like spice up some of the existing operations. But that being said, next thing he has here is, if a big bad being in the mix of a ton of lesser enemies isn't your fancy, I'm sorry, but in my opinion this does not look significantly worse or better than any other Terminus enemy when it comes to how they will function in proper co-op, and I don't think it would have been realistic to ask them to change their formula at this stage. Every single other Terminus are absolute bitches to take out when they're amongst their team, and are supposed to still be exciting and intense when it's a 1v1 duel. From the videos and complaints I have seen, it looks like they're designing the Terminator to fit the theme, and I definitely agree with this. I think this boss, I will say, I think this boss is built more for co-op than he was for solo. You can definitely solo this boss, but his triple clones, I think that'll be much easier to deal with as a group. I think they really are kind of moving towards making enemies for the player base that plays Absolute. We saw that with the Cape grind. They are pushing us towards having like an Absolute grind, which is the hardest difficulty of the base operations outside of the hard stratagem modifiers. So they're really trying to like push these higher difficulties because I think they know the average skill level of the player base for Space Marine 2 has dramatically increased since the game initially came out in 2024. If we had double Terminus enemies back at the launch of this game, if we had things like a Chaos Terminator Sorcerer, players would have had significantly more trouble than they do now, and I think for that reason, they are definitely upping the difficulty in these guys. I figure this guy has to say here. Next he says, yeah, sure, the animations are going to be difficult to read for probably most of us. It's a very unique enemy. That's been the case for every single enemy in the game we first face the enemy. Chaos is supposed to be an uptick from Tyranids. I don't know if that's actually necessarily true because some builds are actually better against Chaos than they are Tyranids, but that being said, I think for the most part Tyranids are easier on the majority of builds. Next they say it's supposed to be unique. Talking to you Chaos Spawn haters, it's just a delayed heavy attack. We've conquered everything thrown at us after the first week or so. This will be no different. And edit, I will say one thing, my eyes might be seeing purple when I get out of the session. The warp effects in my eyes will probably be a lot initially. I'm glad he brought up the Chaos Spawn here, because Chaos Spawn are probably the most hated enemy in Space Marine 2 for like, honestly, I think the only reason is because they require you to time, and timing mechanics are usually the most controversial for a casual player base. And Chaos Spawn, like he says here, have a delayed heavy attack, and they also have harder to read animations, which is like fundamentally going to make them just kind of gatekeep some of the more casual players in the game, though I don't think they're unfair by any means. But timing mechanics on enemies like this and also the new boss, I think these are almost always controversial, so I think that's where most of the complaints will come from. But I do agree with what he has to say, that we have conquered everything thrown at us, and most players will probably have a fairly easy time after like a month or so of this boss being out. But I do have a full guide for him on the channel already if you want like a little bit of a sneak peek. Now for the next thing he has to say here, he says, after a couple weeks of learning, the vast majority of us will get the handle on this trader, and we will all take it down swiftly. You just have to be ready for growing pains. Also, die-hard players that have to optimize their gaming to the absolute max will still two-shot with a tactical aspect scan, so yeah, I don't think I'll see a big tonal shift in my gameplay experience besides new animations and visuals. So he is 100% correct that a tactical aspect scan will positively cook this boss. This boss is super susceptible to stagger, and if you like properly line up a ground pound on your assault class on top of your range attacks, you can probably just skip his phases entirely. So this is definitely true. He says, for my preferences, it needs to be unique exactly like this. It is to have the aura of being swift and lethal if it's so small compared to the other Terminus. And if this smaller enemy didn't have something similar to the wacky Terminator cloning or the unique warp magic animations we see now, then we would just be fighting a more agile, beefed Extremis Terminator. But nah, this bad boy is a fucking menace. There's a reason he survived since the Horus Heresy, I assume. He's supposed to be an absolute baller Thousand Suns boss. In my opinion, it's entirely fitting that this enemy is the most intimidating. 3 of those Terminators killed a Custodian, for crying out loud. They aren't slouches by any definition of the word. So I agree with pretty much everything this guy has to say. Now, as far as the general community consensus for this goes, I have seen most players in just the comment section here say like, yeah, they are 100% okay with challenges. If he respawned as much regular sorcerers, yeah, it'd be a problem, but he's a boss enemy. I think the player base for Space Marine 2 really is ready for more difficult content, and I expect that the two new bosses we are getting in year 3 at the end of operations will probably be pretty similar in difficulty to this guy in the Vortex Beast. And as long as you work as a team, they really are not too bad, because fundamentally they are built around the player base. Now this guy says, wait, is this a clickbait thumbnail for a Reddit post? Are we tailoring thumbnails for the Reddit post now? I have to say, this is slander. This is probably the least clickbait thumbnail I've ever made. Players are going to crash out about this boss. That's just the reality. It's more of a prophecy, really, but I just, it's pretty funny here. But this guy says, Lamau, that'd be wild, but no, I searched Terminator boss Space Marine 2 in Google. That's the only picture I could find that showed it and not the Extremis Terminator. It's first Guardsman thumbnail. It was very fitting. Buggleberry here, W Bubble on the defense, dude, and then they're complaining about me. But anyways, the point is that the new boss, I think the players will have a pretty negative reaction in the first 2 weeks, just like this guy says here. But it's just human nature. When you have a new boss like this, when you have a brand new thing to learn for your brain, it's going to be the most difficult in the first 2 weeks. But I think players, just like with Chaos Spawn, sometimes a hard boss is intended to be a hard boss. And if you're playing games, you can always just turn down your difficulty if the bosses get too difficult. Though I will say there are some toxic mechanics on this guy on the PTS that will probably be nerfed a bit. At the moment, his triple clones do have a pretty devastating amount of HP. They have equivalent HP to a Majora's Tyranid Warrior, which is pretty intense. And that will probably be nerfed in the future, and some of his gun strikes are just not properly working. But besides that, I think this boss is very well made. I do have a full boss guide for him on the channel that should be completely up to date with the official patch launch, and also the general community consensus. I think players are ready for a new boss because we have only had a Hellbrute since the game initially came out, and people say he seems tankier than the Hellbrute. I don't think should be the case if true. Just to clarify here, this is not true. He actually has less HP than a Hellbrute. He has more HP than a Neurothrope, but less HP than a Hellbrute, so he's actually a bit easier there, and he's also incredibly easy to stagger. You can actually stagger this guy like straight up frag grenades, so because of that, he should be pretty easy for players to like kind of nuke down if they stack their staggering effects. Now, as far as what some of the other complaints are here, some say bring on the pain, only in depth is Zudi end. I think he's fine. I just think he's too small, and we'll get lost in a horde if it's not just him there. And also he's like far too much of chaos, has a broken habit of fucky indication, which is just bad game design no matter how you look at it. That's not a him problem, that's a game issue. Well, this really comes down to more of a lore thing, that these guys are literally the same in size and armor as the Chaos Terminator automatons. They just aren't dust, they're psychers instead. But it's definitely true that he does get lost in the Chaos Horde, because it's been like an issue with him that I've found in my games as well. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a Sigismund, shout out Sigismund post. I just play a week or two every update or when feeling like it, and yet I see all the hate for this boss kind of lame. In my opinion, the Neurothrope is and will always be the most hard and shitty Terminus in the game. The rest are mildly annoying when working in a team with someone dealing with hordes, while the rest hit and distract the boss, but Neuro is literally impossible when out of ammo on certain classes. That's all. Can't wait to beat this guy. So I would say this is like the perfect example of someone who's just self-admittedly a casual player that only comes for a week or two every update, and even they're looking at this boss and being like, that looks pretty cool. So I think this boss will be pretty popular over time, and once players actually learn the moveset, it should not be too bad. But that's all I have to say in this one, guys. I was just talking a bit about the boss here because I thought this guy brought up a ton of good points, and also they just posted my video, so I kind of had to respond. And that's all that I have to say in this one. If you like content like this, subscribe for more, and also let me know what you guys think about the new Terminator boss. Are you excited for him? Do you share the worries of some of the player base, or do you think he's going to be a super fun guy to battle? And as always, take it easy. Thanks for watching. Bye.